Good afternoon. Welcome to the Michigan Medicine Peninsula Community Lecture Series. My name is Barbara Wilson, and we are so happy and grateful to be here. On behalf of the University of Michigan, I'd like to thank Vicki Shirley and the library staff for their partnership, and Bill and Gretchen Soutier for the inspiration and sponsorship of this wonderful event. Dr. Gabriel Corfas is the director of the Kresge Hearing Research Institute and associate chair for research for the Department of Otolaryngology and Head and Neck Surgery at the University of Michigan. His laboratory is dedicated to the understanding of the cellular and molecular mechanisms that regulate the formation, the maintenance, and the aging of the inner ear. Dr. Corfas is a national leader in otolaryngology. He has served on multiple boards, and he has won many awards and received many honors for his contributions to the field. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gabriel Corfas.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Should we move this one out? So we don't have feedback? I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill and Gretchen, for organizing this. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So now the volume went down, yes? I think that, how would you feel? Now, we're okay? Good. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Today, the intention is we're going to talk mostly about hearing. But maybe we can start to gauge whether this is something that is something interesting to you. So maybe we can, who has hearing problems here? Who knows or lives with somebody who has hearing problems? This is a significant issue, I think, for you and for the rest of the world. And it's really the concept of hearing health. We have not paid attention enough to it. But luckily, I'm coming to tell you that there is great developments and a lot of hope for all of us. And today, I would like to have mostly a conversation, because you just showed me that this is something that is close to your heart, and most probably you have many, many questions. So I don't want to bore you with a lot of jargon. So what I would like to start is by giving you a little bit of background on how the auditory system works. Not spend too much time, not go too much in depth, but really give you an opportunity to ask me as many questions as you want and can, and I'll answer as much as I know. And when I don't know, I will tell you I don't know, but I know somebody who knows. So, technology. Sorry. Sorry, we're stuck. Oh. Okay, good. So, what is the Kresge? What is the Kresge Hearing Research Institute? The Kresge Hearing Research Institute is an institute that really focuses on learning and studying how the inner ear works, the auditory system works, also balance as well. And it was created in 1960 and is one of the premier institutes in the world dedicated to this kind of research. It's part of the Department of Otolaryngology, so we work very together. So we have basic scientists and physicians, and we try to really understand what we can do to take care of people with hearing problems and balance problems. The Kresge Hearing Institute has nothing to do with the Kresge Foundation. The Kresge family in 1960 supported the building in which the institute was housed for several decades. That building doesn't exist anymore. And we have the name in respect to the Kresge family, who made a much donation to the university in 1960. Now, now we can start talking about hearing, yes? So, as you know, external ear canal, the tympanic membrane, which most probably you heard. And then we have this amazing organ, which is called the inner ear. It's a tiny little pea-sized organ that has an amazing structure that can take sound waves from space and convert it into what you're processing right now, which is my speech using your brain. Also, sorry?
Turn the lights off.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure we can. Is better? Good. Sorry, I will move here so I can see those. So here we have this organ which is called the cochlea that is responsible for what's happening to you now. The air is coming here, vibrating, and I'll show it in this movie. And it's getting inside, and then electrical signals go from the ear to your brain. Now, how this works is that sound waves come in and make this little membrane, tympanic membrane, vibrate. And we have in the middle ear these little tiny bones that then they propagate the sound and make liquid move inside this coil. And if you would extend this coil and look at it at the elongation, it's like a piano. And it goes from high frequencies to low frequencies. And the sounds that are high frequency are in this part of the cochlea, and the low frequencies are here. And this basically transduces the sound waves into neuronal activity, brain activity, that eventually goes into the brain. But let me give you a few details about what happens inside. If we cut this coil, and you can see it looks like a snail shape, there are very specific cells in here. This is called the organ of Corey. And there are these tiny cells that most probably you heard are called hair cells. And they are hair cells because they have these little bundles. And what happens is when vibrations come in, things move relative to each other, and this cell gets excited and sends signals to the neurons that are going to send the information to the brain. And this is called a synapse. In the nervous system, in the brain, the neurons that make us think and feel connect to each other through these structures that are called synapses. And this is the essence of transmission in the nervous system. And these synapses in the inner ear are very special, but also very fragile. So when you go to a rock concert, just a rock concert, 2 hours at 100 decibels, some of these synapses are gone immediately, and they don't come back. And that is one of the reasons why we have a type of hearing loss that we call hidden hearing loss. This is a very subtle form of hearing loss, which is the one I suffer from, which is I go to a restaurant and the noise, and I cannot hear except anything but the person that is beside me, and the rest is a lot of effort. So this is one of the causes of hearing loss. Another one is the loss of these hair cells. If these hair cells are gone completely, then you have complete inability to hear. And in those cases, and we'll discuss that, we use cochlear implants to give you back the ability to receive sound and send it to the brain in the absence of these key transducers that are really key for our hearing. Now, so what happens then is from the inner ear, there are many, many different neurons that eventually bring the information about the sound to a place in our temporal lobes. And that's where our auditory cortex, where it integrates this and makes a series of different mixes of frequencies into speech, and you can interpret and you understand me, or appreciate music, or appreciate a verb. Now, the inner ear not only takes care of hearing, but also it's important for balance. In the inner ear, we have special parts that detect the movement of your head, detect if you are moving forward, detect gravity. When those parts of the ear go wrong, then you have balance disorders, vertigo. For example, Meniere disease. People with Meniere disease can really suffer terrible vertigo because their vestibular system is not telling them where they are. And one side thinks one thing, the other side thinks the other, and it's very, very confusing. So the inner ear is a very delicate organ. We have to take care of it. And when it goes wrong, the consequences are big. We either have hearing loss or we have balance disorders. So what happens when we have hearing loss? Usually, we divide hearing loss in two ways. One is overt. It's the classic, you really can't hear. You go to the audiologist and they say, you have hearing loss and we'll have to give you a hearing aid or a cochlear implant. And then there is this new concept that was really started just a decade ago, which is this concept of hidden hearing loss, which starts much earlier, most probably around middle age, sometimes even younger because people are overexposing their ears with headphones and concerts. And these are disorders that we are trying to cure. Another one that is very, very frequent is tinnitus or tinnitus. This is ringing in your ears. And I have it, and many of us have it. And it can be pretty bad. Some people actually suffer very, very much of this disorder. Others, I got used to it. I just live with some ringing. But some patients really suffer, and there have been cases where people even commit suicide because of that. So it's really a very, very, very difficult disorder. Luckily, work from the Kresge Institute is bringing very promising new therapies for tinnitus. Another disorder that is much less understood is hyperacusis. This was recognized maybe 7 years ago. And this is when sound that should be innocuous bothers you. And some people, can say, oh, that's loud. But there are some people who cannot live in normal society because every single sound that they hear is like pain. Actually, there are people who use muffler protectors all the time, and some people that have moved away from cities because this disorder. And this is something that several people are trying to understand what's wrong. And we really, in that case, we know very little about it. Then, of course, there are other disorders of hearing that are not related to the inner ear, but it really are problems in the brain. And some people have a perfectly normal functioning ear, but the circuits that are sending the information from the ear to the brain are not working well, and they have what we call auditory processing disorders, so central auditory processing disorder. And finally, balance disorders, which like all these ones, come from the cochlea. And these can be, as I told you, devastating because many people with balance disorders can get hurt, and it's one of the largest causes of death in the elderly, which are the falls. So this is a big problem. So at least 3 million children in the US have hearing loss, half of them under age of 3. Many kids are born deaf. And when they are born deaf, and if they're born and they don't get any help to hear, then they have very hard time developing speech. And it's very critical to act very early. For this group, the hearing loss in adults is very common. It starts relatively low, 2%, at relatively middle age. It goes quickly to 8.5%, then it goes to 25% between 65 and 74. And People 75 and older, if you don't have hearing loss, you are the lucky one, because 50% at least has it. The number of young people that are having hearing loss is increasing constantly, because we are exposing ourselves to more and more noise. And this is primarily this kind of hidden hearing loss. There are more and more young people that are complaining about difficulties in understanding speech in noisy environments. And kids is really dramatic. There have been several studies in teenagers showing that the number of kids with hearing loss is increasing in epidemic proportions. So much so that hearing loss is the third most common chronic conditions after arthritis and hypertension. So it's not surprising that so many of you either have hearing loss or hearing complaints or a loved one, because it's really affecting so many people. The question is how we are going to take care of it. Yes? So the first problem that comes with hearing loss is communication. It's very hard to talk, to hear, to communicate clearly. That has an impact, and people with hearing disorders can have frequently depression or social isolation, and this is quite common. Now, in recent years, there have been very important studies that show that hearing loss is the most clear causal cause of cognitive decline and dementia. So when we lose hearing, it increases the probability that we will have faster decline and more cognitive problems. It doesn't mean that if you have hearing loss, you have that. It just increases your chances, okay? People with hearing loss also have higher frequency of cardiovascular problems, also in some way because less movement. Interestingly, people with hearing loss also tend to have lower income than people that can hear. And of course, there is increased falls because of the balance disorders, hospitalization and mortality in there. So if we can treat all the disorders of the ear, we could have a remarkable impact on health of many, many millions of people by increasing their quality of life, their economical and financial status, their health, preventing deaths from falls, and preventing dementia. Now, tinnitus is another disorder that we mentioned. It's a very common one, much less recognized than hearing loss, but very, very prevalent. Roughly 10% of the US population experiences tinnitus every year, and some of us will have it constantly. Hyperacusis is something newer. Still, it's not clear how many people suffer from this, so different studies say from between 0.2% to 17.2% of the US population. And the prevalence is higher in women and in people with hearing disorders. And the balance disorders are remarkable. Yes, as many as 35% of adults age 40 and older in the United States, maybe 70 million people, have experienced some form of vestibular dysfunction. And it can be very debilitating. People cannot drive, cannot bike, cannot walk. It can be really, really problematic. So how can we do this? How can we take care of this? This is what our doctors would like to do. We haven't been able to make a tiny doctor yet. We're working on it. So one of the key things that, the first line of defense is the hearing aid. And I'm sure many of you have hearing aids here. It's a remarkable device. Yes, very simple. But now with technology, it has become increasingly sophisticated. For example, today, You can connect to this microphone and hear me better. You can tune them to the specific defects in your ear. You know, we hear many different sounds between frequencies of 2 kilohertz to 12 kilohertz. But you may have a loss specifically at 4 kilohertz. You don't want to amplify every single sound. So they can tune them up. Now, these devices are great, but they amplify many things. They amplify the specific signals you want, plus the noise. So they have a limit. So they are very useful. We wish they would be better, and nothing equals a functional, healthy ear. The sophistication of this device that nature has given you is really remarkable. For people that have more severe hearing loss, where all the hair cells are gone or not working, in the 1970s, Dr. House developed these initial cochlear implants, and then now has become much more developed. This is a long electrode that the surgeon introduces inside your cochlea, and they install, you have a receiver, and then through your cranium, it transmits the signals from the sound from the outside into your behind the skull, which goes directly to this electrode, and the electrode gives different signals of electricity along the cochlea. So as I told you, the cochlea has a tonotopic map, yes, has different frequencies. So one electrode gives you 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, 8 kilohertz. The problem with the cochlear implant is that you have a piano, you have hundreds of different tones, and then you really go to work with 8. So here I will try to illustrate, this is a computational model that tries to illustrate how is to hear with a normal ear versus with a cochlear implant. So this is normal.
What kind of bait do you use to catch salmon?
Can you hear it? Okay. This would be a simulation taking that sound, that specific clip, and chopping it into 8 frequencies.
What kind of bait do you use to catch salmon?
So you can hear it. It's degraded, but you can still understand it. That is because your brain is an amazing machine. With very little information, you can make out the sound and find the speech in that degraded signal. And that's where these cochlear implants excel. Now, there is other kind of signals that they do not that well with cochlear implants. Music. Can you hear this? Sorry, it's long, but I cannot stop it. It's not that I love this music. This is a simulation of what a cochlear implant gives you when it's music. So this is not every single patient. Some patients are going to do much better, and some patients are going to do much worse. But in average, the quality of the music experience is, in many cases, lost. We have actually a new investigator in the institute that is trying to create new ways for cochlear implant patients to appreciate pitch and music, and using visual cues and tactile cues that are going to go together with the cochlear implant to make the experience of appreciating music much more vivid. We are very hopeful. So, just to start getting to the end of the presentation, this part, the formal part, is there is excitement. We believe we are at the cusp of starting to create new therapies for hearing disorders. So now, finally, people are almost there to start doing clinical trials on gene therapy for hearing disorders. What's happening is that the first approach that several companies are taking is to target genetic disorders that affect primarily children, because that is the proof of concept that you can do more easily. Yes, you know this person, because of their genetics, they're not going to hear. If you give them this gene therapy and they hear, you succeeded. So hopefully, once this is already achieved, the sky's the limit, and there will be many, many different opportunities to use gene therapy to cure by bringing new proteins and new genes into the ear and either restore or prevent the loss of hearing. So for example, in hidden hearing loss, what we found is that the hidden hearing loss is primarily because we are losing those synapses in the ear. Very tiny connections between the hair cells and the neurons. And in our lab, we found that a molecule that is critical in creating these synapses can be used to regenerate them. So, for example, if we take mice and expose them to a rock concert, they lose the synapses, but if we give them this protein, they lose them, but they regenerate and they hear again. And using the same molecule, we published this last week, we've been able to stop the loss of synapses in mice in a way that we have slowed down the age-related hearing loss, and we have been able to keep mice hearing much better as they are reaching the end of their lives. So there is promise. We know we can do this. We have still to work to move things from mice to humans. Mice were very happy. Actually, they sent me congratulations and thank me very much for all the work we have done. So excitement, tinnitus has been really challenging. People have been struggling to understand what's going on. Dr. Susan Shore in our institute, she identified using animal models the basic mechanisms that were driving the formation of tinnitus. And then she learned how the specific ways in which the brain was being affected. Tinnitus is not coming from the inner ear, it's in the brain. It's something that is in our brain. Basically what happens is when we lose a little bit of hearing, your brain is not happy. It's saying, where's my sound? And it turns on the amplifier, and it creates this phantom sound that is covering that hearing loss. And that produces a process of plasticity where the brain tries to compensate. And what Susan Shore discovered is that there is a way to combine sound and electrical stimulation to the neck or the face, half an hour a day, to quiet down the tinnitus, and this lasts for a long time. So just half an hour of treatment, and we hope this will help. Yes, please.
Is that kind of like when you have your hearing aids and the tinnitus, and you cover your ear and you get this ringing sound? Is there something like that going on with the brain?
It's not exactly the same. The electronics and the brain sometimes work in the same way, sometimes don't. In that particular case, when the hearing aid produces a sound, is because it enters into a loop where the sound that it's producing gets back into the microphone and it keeps amplifying. In the brain, it's slightly different, which is that the nervous system is, the neurons can fire faster or slower, or they can connect to the wrong neuron, and it's a slightly different process. So there is very excited. We are all very excited to wait. They already did 2 clinical trials. The first one was very successful. The second one, I've not seen the results, but I hear looks good. So hopefully, maybe in a year or so, I will be able to try that device myself once it's in the market, and you too. Then one of the challenges is, now we know we can repair synapses. We can give hearing aids, cochlear implants. But can we rebuild the ear back? Can we give you back your hair cells? And there is very exciting work because now we understand the genes that regulate the formation of these cells. We have a colleague that can take stem cells in culture and induce the formation of hair cells. So now we are trying, these scientists are trying to find ways to do that in the inner ear, either by gene therapy to convert the cells in the ear, whatever is remaining, to make a new ear, basically rebuild the ear from scratch, or injecting stem cells into the ear that they will help able to give you back your hearing. And like there are now cochlear implants, there are at least, there is one company that is creating a vestibular implant that is going to give people with vestibular dysfunction a replacement for the vestibular system, and it's like a gyroscope, and you will be having something that tells you where you're moving in space, where is gravity. So it's very exciting that patients who have really dramatic problems walking and being steady may be able to recover this. And finally, one of the issues I told you about the cochlear implants is that we go from having hundreds of different frequency detectors to having just 8. And the limitation is because we use electricity, and electricity spreads. So we cannot have small electrodes that are powerful enough to activate each little piece of the cochlea. But if we can do this with light, you could imagine the light is much easier to control and less spreading because it could be small lasers. So now people are trying to combine gene therapy to put light-activated molecules in the ear with an electrode that instead of using electricity will use light. And there is a lot of hope that soon cochlear implants, soon, let's say 15, 20 years, they may be able to be as good as a native ear. So now I will hear your questions. Yes.
You mentioned about your mice where you're able to have them to where they could recover from. How did you treat them to recover them?
Yeah, so what we are able to do with mice is to play with their genes. In mice, we can take genes out, put genes in, we can activate the genes, we can silence the genes whenever we want. It takes a lot of work, but it can be done. So what we did is we made mice where this molecule that is critical for forming the synapses, we can either take it out or activate it in at certain times in life. For example, we do it immediately after we give a noise exposure. Or we activate it when the mouse is 1 year old, that is midlife, let's say 55.
All molecular then? All molecular then?
All molecular, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's neurotrophin 3.
That's neurotrophin 3. Who asked, sorry? Oh, yeah.
So is recruitment the same thing as a hyperacusis?
Recruitment?
Yeah,
I honestly don't know that term.
okay.
But, yeah.
My wife reacts very sensitively to any high noise.
Mm-hmm.
It induces pain for
Yeah.
her. And an audiologist, I think, called it recruitment. I was just wondering if that's the exact same syndrome as hyperacusis.
It could be audiology jargon versus what we discuss in the research side, which we call it hyperacusis.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does cell phone use contribute to hearing loss, and if so, how much?
So I would say that everything depends on the volume of your phone. So if you put it at a very high level, you're blasting your ear with high level of sound. So I think that it's not, the cell phone is not what it's doing. It is the control that we have over the cell phone that is doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you recommending cochlear implants for people over age 75?
So I don't have the power, because I'm not a physician, to recommend or not recommend. But I think that the age for cochlear implant has been going up. People are much more comfortable in providing cochlear implants. Insurances are already changing their perception and the decision. So you should basically consult with your physician and audiologist whether you are a good candidate. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I've noticed one of the problems on this screen that I have. My wife is a piano player, and I used to really enjoy listening to the sounds. But the sounds today are not going up and down, so the rhythm is gone. And this is one of the things I have experienced with my cochlear.
And by the way, he got his cochlear implant 1 year ago at age 87.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and he's performing pretty well. Yes.
What's happening in the ear when one equalizes by closing their nose and blowing?
Yeah, so that is more related to the middle ear. So our middle ears are connected to our here through the eustachian tubes. And basically what you're doing is controlling the amount of pressure and the position of the tympanic membrane that can be changed by pressure, external pressure when you go underwater. So it's not about the inner ear, but it's really about the ossicles and how effectively they can move.
Can you control that? When I equalize, my hearing goes normal, and then it goes back to abnormal.
So I would say that most probably you may have an issue with your tubes, and I would talk to a laryngologist to see if you need some treatment, antibiotics or something that may be blocked, and you need sinus infections or something. They can do that too. So maybe it's not related to the inner ear, but it's more to the middle ear.
What kind of condition is it when you think somebody has said the cat and the hat, and they've actually said the bat and the rat?
This is exactly kind of, there could be two reasons. One is peripheral, like hidden hearing loss, or central. When it's peripheral, yes, luckily, for example, we were able to make mice that have less or more synapses. And then we make them listen to certain sounds and record their behavior. And now we know that when mice have less synapses, they have harder time processing very tiny sounds. While when they have extra synapses, they have super hearing. So just a variation in the number of synapses may change the ability to detect the difference in subtle sounds. So most probably it's that kind of hidden hearing loss that is contributing to. Of course, if it's an auditory processing problem, then that's tougher because right now we have no ways to change the brain. But that can be solved by slowing down the speech. So you can find ways to ask people, please speak slower. And that gives you more time to process the auditory signal.
You've obviously never had conversations with some of the women I deal with.
This gene therapy of rebuilding the ear, how realistic is it and how far away is it?
So I believe that rebuilding from scratch, it will take a couple of decades. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think that rebuilding the synapses, if we're lucky, 5 to 7 years, if things go well now with all the developments, and we can use, if the gene therapy will be approved and proven to work, then we know what to do. So we are very hopeful. Rebuilding, but things may happen very quickly. Everything depends on how lucky we are with the work in the labs.
Where is that taking place?
So there are many labs at the Kresge Institute, in many different labs. All the researchers, we get together a couple of times a year and we share what we do, everybody, and we compete and help each other at the same time. And that's why I know that there are exciting things happening at the Kresge Hearing Research Institute and elsewhere.
Can I just ask one?
Yeah.
Following up to what she said about the clogged tubes.
Yeah.
I have hearing aids, but is it possible that you have clogged tubes too and that affects your hearing as well? And how would you find out?
I would recommend you see an otolaryngologist.
But does it have an effect? These tubes being not clear?
It can make your ears get clogged, yes, by pressure, by infections. Inner ear infection, middle ear infections are a very good reason why people have hearing problems. Kids in particular. So, yeah. And of course there is conductive hearing loss, which is when the bones in the middle ear are not working well. And that is also important. It goes with the fact of the pressure, but also the movement of the bone.
Is there a fix for the bones?
Actually, surgeons can replace your bones if necessary. They make them back and put them in. Artificial ones. Yeah. It's like a hip replacement for the ear. Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Really appreciate you coming and sharing your time with us. So after hearing the 8 gigahertz, my question might be answered that just the terrifying sound of it might be the cause that we're starting to get depressed and dementia from the hearing loss, but I want to hear it from you. Do you know any causes that links that?
The causes that links hearing loss with dementia?
Dementia and depression, yeah.
Yeah, so it has not proven how hearing loss causes dementia, but the notion is that social isolation is one potential cause of that. For example, it's known that people, when they retire, cognitive capabilities can change very dramatically. And this is because they stop being engaged, they get isolated, they stop seeing people all the time. So there is a very strong link between cognitive function, social interactions, and we know that hearing loss affects them very dramatically. Then experience changes genes in your brain. So, and those genes and molecules that are being changed by the lack of social isolation, the lack of social interactions, changes how your brain works and could be triggering degenerative processes. We also study the effects of social isolation on the brain. And I'll tell you that when we take mice, very young mice, when we wean them from the mother, and if we put them in a single cage alone versus being with other 3 mice, a key part of their brain called prefrontal cortex is completely changed by the social isolation. And completely changes their cognitive function and their ability to do social interactions. So don't isolate yourself. If you have hearing loss, stay connected. Keep talking to your friends. Keep talking to your loved ones. Keep thinking, keep reading, keep listening to things as much as you can, because it's critical. Keeping the brain young is not just age, is activity.
If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Sorry?
If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Problem, especially when I watch TV, when people talk extremely fast, like some people do, and news commentators will, they're on a time schedule, so they talk twice as fast as a normal person does. When they talk fast like that, I have a hard time understanding it.
Yeah, my father, who is 90, he has hearing aids, and when I talk to him, he says, talk slower, speak slower. It's not the issue of the volume, it's the pace, because it is hard. But, you know, I wish we all had closed captions. I like that, would be a great device.
You talked about the origin of some of these problems being in the ear. Are there hearing loss problems that originate in the brain?
Yeah.
And if so, I know, is that where gene therapy would go to work, in the brain, or are there therapeutic responses?
Right now, the developments are in the ear, not in the brain. What's happening in the brain is a next frontier. It will take a bit longer. Yeah. We still don't know much about how auditory processing defects happen.
How close are we to having the light technology for the cochlear implants?
So the prime mover there is a colleague in Germany, Tobias Moser, and I know they started a company, and at the same time they continue doing their work in their lab. They are having, you know, some progress, but it's challenging. This notion of, it's called a technique called optogenetics, that it's based on people who discovered that they can make molecules that can activate neurons just by light. And that started a couple of, 2 decades ago, and it's coming, still it's not ready for use in humans, because there are toxicity problems and people are engineering the molecules to have them perfectly right, because we don't want to cause more problems by trying to solve them.
Is hearing loss hereditary?
There are definitely hearing loss hereditary forms. One very frequent one is through genes called connexins. And that's maybe it's about 50% of the cases in the world of genetic hearing loss. In some cases, there are several different mutations. That's a big gene. And some kids are born already without hearing. Others lose their hearing as they age. We have a physician in the institute, and he's a physician in family medicine, who is cochlear implanted because he has one of those mutations. And some people, if cochlear implants were very well in most of those people.
This would be age-related, not something...
Age-related, there is a sense that in some families there is more frequent or earlier age-related hearing loss, but the genes have not been well identified yet. It's much more complex because when you have a family and 50% of your family members have certain disease, it's much easier to isolate the gene. When you're looking and you need to look at large populations of thousands of people in order to find the gene and different mutations occur, it's much harder. Yeah.
So, sorry to jump around on you, but you were talking before about the light-activated molecules. Is that in congruency with like 3D printing soft tissues now? I mean, I know they're starting to come out with like parts and things. Are they doing that with hearing as well yet?
Well, we have a faculty member, David Zoft, who is creating ears with 3D printing and also larynx replacements. But the optogenetics is not being used in that case. The optogenetics, people are hoping to use it for the brain and for the ear, but it's more for cells rather than when you do 3D printing, you mostly are not printing the cells, you're printing the infrastructure on which the cells sit.
Okay, so when you say ear, you mean like inner ear?
Ear.
The whole, okay.
No, he's printing external ears.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
As you experience hearing loss as you get older, is it likely to continue to decline as you continue to age?
So it varies depending on people, the degree. In some people will happen faster, in others will be start and slow down. I don't think there is simple predictions about each individual case. But again, a mouse doctor. So, whatever I'm telling you, you should consult with your audiologists and your otolaryngologists. I have to know my limitations.
Are cochlear implants compatible with MRI?
Now they are.
Okay. So what if you have an old one?
Sorry?
What if you have an old implant?
So, in some cases, people can replace. It's a risky procedure. It's a surgery. I think that most doctors will be concerned about doing that unless there is a very clear reason. So it's always risk versus benefit. And again, those are equations that the physicians manage much better than I.
Can you speak to episodes of vertigo?
Hello again. What would you like me to say about that?
I think that's your area, isn't it?
Well, I work on things that are not episodic in the case of my specific research, but there are different reasons. Meniere's is something that is episodic, and there are benign types of vestibular disorders that can be manipulated but in the vestibular system, you have the hair cells, and then to stimulate, it's not air that moves them, not waves, but there is a kind of a mix of proteins and crystals that are moved by the movement of your head or gravity, and sometimes they dislodge. And the physicians can make maneuvers with your head to get it back into place. Some people have it once, some people have recurrence, and it can be done. Sometimes those things are very hard to repair. I have a very, very close friend in Argentina, where I grew up, who actually had so many problems that actually he could not drive, he could not bike, so he chose to have his inner ear destroyed in order to stop having these episodes. He already had lost hearing on the same side, so it was not a big loss. But yeah, so some people choose that. Yeah.
I share the same problem as you, but background noise really not well. So I share the same problem. So are you working on our problem?
Oh, I am working on it. You betcha.
I have a related question to that. I have the same problem also, and several different times I've had my hearing tested, and every time the person testing it says a hearing aid won't really help you, and that the technology isn't there to help that. And so is that still the case, or?
Yeah, so let me try to explain what happens there. So in the ear, I show you we have the hair cells, yes?
Yeah.
But also, then the hair cells communicate with the neurons. The neurons in the ear have three types. The low sensitivity, the high sensitivity, and the medium sensitivity. So when you're in a very quiet place, you use the ones that are for low levels of sound. When they saturate, you start using the other ones. And when the sound goes higher, you use the high threshold. Those that have high thresholds are the ones that are destroyed the synapses first. So basically, you are left with a ear that works in silence, works at middle level, but it saturates and you have no ability to detect signal. Signal and noise are merged together and it's just noise. So what we are trying to do is to repair those specific signals, the synapses that are of the high threshold neurons. If we can do that, we will be able to hear again in noise.
This lady over here is better.
Oh,
Yes.
I need to be taller. Thank you. I've read about clinical trials of a drug referred to as SPI 1005 to treat the hearing loss and the tinnitus related to Meniere's. Are you aware of any results?
I don't, but that's interesting. I don't know. I should check.
It's out of Sound Pharmaceuticals in Seattle.
Who?
Sound Pharmaceuticals from
yeah.
Seattle.
The exciting part is that until 10 years ago, everything was in academic labs. But 10 years ago, we academicians were able to produce enough information that suddenly people in biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies started saying, maybe we can start thinking about making therapies and drugs for hearing problems. So that has changed dramatically. So now what we are doing in the labs eventually is going to help develop new therapies, and that they will move to companies, and that's the life cycle of therapeutics.
Will that news come through the audiologist or through the ENT practices?
Depends
or
on
somewhere else.
I hope that will come from everywhere. But yeah, primarily your points of care for hearing problems will be the audiologists and the otolaryngologists. And they should be the ones that should be able to help you. Now, my advice to everybody is educate yourself. Don't depend on anybody. Yes? The web has brought information to the tip of your fingers. You can either yourself or ask anybody in your close relationships to help you find information. I was surprised that actually I was receiving Google notices that I was going to give this talk today. So if you do the right search, you will find it. Yeah.
When you take an exercise class, they frequently talk about the importance of strengthening your core to improve your balance. Is that a significant component, or do you feel it's all from the inner ear?
I believe that maintaining your core and your body and your muscles is critical as we age. We start losing muscle mass, middle age, 60s, something, and that is going to really weaken your ability to respond to and maintain posture and balance. So definitely a healthier body will help you with balance. If your vestibular system is not working, it's not going to help much. You can have, really an amazing body, but if your key detector of movement is defective, it's going to be problematic. But doesn't matter what happens, our ear will age. So as much as we keep our bodies healthy and strong, it's going to help. Yeah.
So my question is, how does one find an otolaryngologist, whatever?
Yeah, one of those.
So I go to the ENT, and there are 4 or 5 doctors there, and the first one I don't get any satisfaction, and then there's another one down in Manistee. Am I just supposed to jump until I find someone that wants to look at causes rather than just, oh, you can't hear? Well, I already know that.
That's a really delicate question. And this is being taped. And it's going to be on the web. So my advice is, it's important to find a clinician that listens to you, understands you, and is able to diagnose your problem. And sometimes you will need to try different ones. I think this is an experience for many, many people in different places in the world. So I would say
Like $125 a visit or so, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm like.
Maybe the doc has a hearing problem.
Yeah, the other possibility is just come to Ann Arbor. We have great doctors. Yes.
And can I go to someone and have my synapses checked to
No.
see? No.
No.
How many I still have?
Yes. So we believe there is a way, but still is in debate. So we are now doing some experiments with people to see if we can do that right. And this is also I came from Harvard. and I still work together with some of my colleagues there, and they're also trying, and in many places, people are really trying to find a diagnosis for the synapse loss. Very, very tricky. Yeah. Yes?
I just wanted to share with whoever asked the question 2 questions ago. Absolutely, ask your primary care doctor to refer you to U of M to an otolaryngologist, and they will absolutely do that.
Well, my experience is that ENTs, there's one office here in Traverse City and one in Manistee.
Well, ENT and otolaryngology is the same.
And
They're
U of
not
M
the same?
though is.
Is the same.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So we are the otolaryngology department.
Yeah, and they are a super large, amazing teaching facility. So if you want the top
U of
care.
M.
Yeah.
Happy to return to my alma mater.
Everybody will be happy to see you. Yes.
So this is kind of going a different direction, but I'm wondering if research has been done with autistic children as far as hearing loss goes, because I know that autistic children have a hard time with outside stimulation.
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. And really, there is a lot of evidence that the auditory system in autistic children doesn't work right. And there is a sense of that it's in some way an auditory processing problem. Also, there is this sense of hyperacusis, but in this case seems to be central. Yes, because they get startled easily. So there is an issue of gating sensory stimuli and processing them. It's not only about auditory, but the auditory is very central to the autistic problem. Communication. But autistic kids can have high sensitivity to other stimuli as well. But it's a multi-system problem, but definitely there is something very specific and important regarding the auditory system. And one of our investigators, a very bright young investigator, is looking at autism, trying to understand with mice, the autistic mice, those exist as well, that trying to understand what happens with the auditory system in that case. Very exciting and challenging work.
Thank you.
Yes?
What would you say to the
What would you say in response to the proliferation of all these ads on television now that are having people call in or get online or whatever and get their hearing aids through that type of circumstance instead of going to an ENT?
I would say it's a mixed response. So I think it's terrific that now there are over-the-counter hearing aids. People had economical barriers to get hearing aids, and it was very important to reduce or remove that barrier to allow people who were suffering from hearing loss and could not augment and therefore were isolated. It's great. Now, the issue is what is the quality of those devices? It's going to be important to know. And also, whether they are the right ones for you. So I feel that, I hope that people that get those devices are going to still consult with an audiologist to get the right one, or if they are tunable, to tune them to their needs. So we will see in a few years whether this was a good idea or not. In principle, it's a good idea in my opinion. I know some of the people that drove that to happen. But again, it's only in practice that we would know. I hope that this is that, everything depends on the people that are selling those devices are doing their jobs right. They create good devices, they provide the right advice, and don't try to skim people. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you for coming.
One more question.
How do we access this on the web?
I don't know.
The library will at some point make it available on the website. I'm not sure how long it takes. Jane, do you know?
Few days, probably. It'll also be on Old Michigan Gazette. I'll run it on there too.
Okay, so there are two places. You can either access it through the Peninsula Community Library or the Old Michigan Gazette.
It is going to be recorded. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I hope you found it illuminating and interesting. There will be some folders that we'll be handing out when you leave that'll have additional information. And again, thank you so much. We're very grateful.